This is Out of the Box with your host, Jonathan Clark. Out of the Box, Sunday nights at 9 on Q1043.
Welcome back. Jonathan Clark here on Q1043's Out of the Box. He is a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the Police, a multiple Grammy winner, a prolific author, songwriter, many solo albums, a diverse catalog of all kinds of musical projects, composer for film soundtracks, and a celebrated photographer as well. His name is Andy Summers. How are you, my friend? You're looking good.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here in New York.
Yeah, your latest book, do I have this right? The Bones of Chuang Tzu? Did I say that right?
That's correct.
And that is your sixth book of photography, the latest album, Triboluminescence, his 14th solo album. Did I say that properly?
You did.
Okay, good.
That was good.
And you're on tour now, all the tour dates at andysummers.com. Talk about the title of the album, Triboluminescence.
Triboluminescence. Well, basically, in my thinking, I came across this word in my studies, and it's a scientific...
That was like 10 years ago, right?
Well, I mean, as someone who's always, making stuff, you always have to have good titles. I certainly believe in putting a grabby title on anything, so I'm someone who keeps a list of words or certain things that, that might be one to use somewhere. Anyway, somewhere in that kind of stuff, I came across the scientific word triboluminescence, which means creating light from dark. And, it's very much about, the creative act of music. I thought it was a very applicable metaphor, so therefore.
Well, absolutely. I listened to the song Gigantopithecus.
Yes.
Am I saying that correctly?
That's right. You're good.
That is a really cool song. Also, Haunted Dolls. Lots of cool things going on in these songs.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a film score or a soundtrack, this album. So I'm wondering, does this music from this album go with the latest photography book?
Okay, a couple of answers to that question.
Okay.
I have a book called The Bones of Chuang Tzu. All the photographs were shot in China. It's currently with Steidl in Germany, awaiting the creative act.
Oh, okay.
It's not. It's actually advertised on Amazon and blah blah blah. They keep putting the date back. This is very typical of Steidl. So we're down to make it. So,
right.
But I have two other ones coming up anyway. So I'm not quite sure what's happening with Steidl, but I do feature a lot of that sequence in the solo show that I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like it when you look at the photography from the latest book and you listen to the song, they seem to work together.
Yeah.
Well,
I do. No, there's an absolute parallel between the music I'm trying to do and the photography I try and do, because it's one sensibility. You wouldn't do like highly bright colored Mickey Mouse pictures on one hand and then do dark sort of mysterious music on the other. It's one sensibility, and I try to make them feel that way.
Right.
And in the show, I have a surrealist sequence. I have that sequence from in The Bones of Chuang Tzu. I have a sequence which goes with the track Triboluminescence, all of which was shot in Southeast Asia, in Bali, and mostly in that area, and with Balinese gamelan players and so on. And that track definitely reflects that kind of feeling. So, I'm trying to put a fresh edge onto this kind of instrumental music. So it's not just piano, bass, and drums. I'm doing things like sort of exotic loops behind the guitar solos and the setup. So the whole thing gets a very much more of a sort of exotic shimmering quality.
Is it? How is it being like a for lack of a better term, a one-man band? It seems like it's gotten a lot easier to do something like that over the years.
Yeah, I mean,
technologically wise, I mean.
Yeah, but, people are doing, a lot of that stuff, looping, and that it's become very much part of the modern scene. And I use some of that in the show. I mean, I have basically two ways of doing it. I do a couple like Triboluminescence and another African one called Adinkra, where I went back into Pro Tools and I took out basically the original lead guitar line. So I played the backing, and we slightly edited it for the live performance to go with the photography. Then I'll do a couple of other ones where there's a little bit of a loop going on in the background. Then some of it is just pure solo guitar. So I kind of mix it up throughout the show. And I should say, it's a work in progress.
Right.
Every time I do it, I go, okay, I've got to change that. Little refinements.
Do you find yourself going back? I'm assuming you recorded this in your home studio, or
Well, I wouldn't call it home studio.
Okay, but I mean, having that
studio.
luxury, do you find yourself always going back to like thinking, let me just adjust that. Let me take that retake.
You're right. It's a luxury. I could say to my assistant, all right, well, let's use Triboluminescence. Let's go back into Pro Tools and do that. So
Right.
it's really not that difficult because we have all the stuff, all the files, of course.
Right.
And we go back and do a sort of re-edit.
I want to talk further about your photography. You've been doing this a long time. I read that you first picked up a camera during the early police days.
Exactly right.
And what kind of camera was that?
Well, I'm actually writing a very lengthy essay about this because next year in France in February I have a huge retrospective at the Pavillon Populaire.
Is that a gallery or is
it's a kind of a museum? Actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Montpellier, France. So it's a very big deal. It's huge. There's 300 photographs in it. And they expect me to write an essay about all that, blah, blah, blah. So I'm having to think it through because I don't want to rush it. But the first section I've written was about how I was in New York with the band, of course, totally surrounded by photographers, and we were a very hot item, and everybody was so interested. And suddenly, out of the blue, we three unknowns are surrounded by this phalanx of New York very hip photographers. And, I kind of started to see their thing, the cameras and the bags and the gear and the attitude and the physicality of it. And I got very seduced by it. And I just sort of said, well, I'm going to be about the next 10 years on the road doing this. I can see where this is going. Nothing but hotel rooms. I have to have something to do. And
hurry up and wait, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, an hour and a half on the stage and, 24 hours of waiting. So I actually went out with a New York photographer and bought a Nikon FE, and that's where I started. And I had sort of normal interest in photography, but wasn't obsessed by it, except some sort of passing interest. I had a few photography books, and always had a camera, of course. But I thought, right, I'm taking this seriously, and I took it like a fish to water. It was in me.
Yeah, because not everybody can be a good photographer, even if you have the best camera in the world. I mean, you have to have a steady hand.
You have to develop an aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's all photography is about the mind. It's not about the camera. The camera is secondary. You learn this as you go along, and you start off as a happy snapper, and then, of course, like anything else, it's like playing music. You do it long enough, you get more and more sophisticated with it. You look back at 5 years ago and laugh. This is the way it goes.
But I'm thinking back then, this is the 80s. I mean, whatever you did it right, and you kept those photos safe and secure.
I did, yes.
And the camera as well. Which is not an easy thing to do when you're first starting out in a band. You're driving around in a van. It's like a blizzard in Minneapolis, and the van breaks down. But when did you finally go back and sort of go through all those photos? Was it for the?
Well, it was a strange kind of psychological thing for me because I basically photographed almost every day of the police. Not realizing I was just kind of photographing my life, as well as
something to do as another
and
hobby.
I'd go out to New York City and I'd look at the pictures of Robert Frank and I'd find that very inspiring. I'd look at the pictures of Ralph Gibbs and find those very inspiring, and I started to, develop. The mind develops, and you probably get a bit slicker with a camera, but I was sort of unconsciously documenting the band, and I did it for the whole time, and about 2 years into it, I kind of woke up to, I'm documenting the band. Nobody stopped me. I was right on the inside,
right?
Photographing away
like a
maniac. Photographing the band and also making surrealist pictures in the corridors of hotels at night, and photographing girls and doing just having tremendous fun with it.
It's and I guess the first few books that you put out were sort of documenting the police. So like one or two books, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the first one I ever did was with William Morrow in New York, and I had absolutely no idea. I went to them, they go, very nice, Andy, okay, yeah. Okay, here's your advance, go and make the book. I went, I had no idea. How do you make a bloody book, So I started with this guy Joe, his name was. I was living at the American Stanhope Hotel, so I was had all these photographs. I thought, Christ, how do you make a book? This was very daunting. I had no idea. But fate played out. Actually, a printer came over, a very famous printer. He printed Robert Frank's books, an old guy from Brooklyn. What was his name? But he brought over a book and he showed it to me. It was The Lines of My Hand by Robert Frank, and it was a Japanese edition. And I did notice on the inside that it said layout by Ralph Gibson. Ralph had travelled with Robert Frank, so this is a deep connection. I went, wow, Ralph Gibson. He said, yeah, just give Ralph a call. So he was like this towering legend. You know, even at that stage, like, his books were my favourite because of the kind of musicality and the photography and the sort of dream sequence stuff. Wonderful, very attractive to me. He said, call him up. So I called him up, and I just got a message. He's down here, I was up there. And anyway, I did get a call back from him, and he said, I said, I'm this guy, I'm in this band and trying to do a book. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be up that way, man, I'll just drop by. So he did. He came to my suite at the American Stanhope, and the room was covered in photographs, like guitars out, cool shit on the radio. So all this, let's go have lunch, Anyway, long story short, we totally hit it off, and he was into guitar playing, music, and he said, all right, dump that other guy, we'll do it down at my studio, I'll help you with this.
Wow.
Buy me a guitar.
Yeah. That's not bad.
And that's where the great friendship started, and we just played together in East Hampton.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So that first book, was it color and black and white?
No, it was just black and white.
Oh, okay, all black and white.
It was called Throb.
Right. Oh, okay. I have not read your book, One Train Later. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. But that turned into your film, Can't Stand Losing You.
Yeah.
I know that turning that book into a film was quite an arduous task.
Oh, it is.
Right?
Well, I think any film, by definition, is arduous.
Right.
Yeah, there's no easy path.
Right.
No, and, typically with that, there was great enthusiasm for it, and I was sort of shocked. But I got the whole thing hooked up. And then, of course, sort of took a dive. At one point, the Yari Film Company lost their distribution, so that kicked a big hole, and it stopped for about 6 months. Then somehow we got it up and running again. Then Yari didn't like what the film director, it was a woman, was turning in, and we sort of shut down again. And then Brett Morgan, who was the producer, suggested that a guy called Andy Grieve, who's one of the top editors in the US, take over it and also get the credit as director. Well, I met Andy in New York, and we seemed to get along well enough, and obviously he was a very sharp editor. And so he took that woman's, the lady director's footage, the way she presented it. Man, this guy's a genius. He flipped the whole thing into what became the movie. But this took 6 years.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely
part of the course.
We're speaking with Andy Summers, his latest book, The Bones of Changzhou, his 6th book of photography, and the latest album, Triboluminescence, his 14th solo album. I wanted to ask you, have you checked out Stewart's latest project, Gizmodrome, with Adrian Ballou?
I've avoided it, actually.
You've avoided it?
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. They came by the show, too, actually.
Oh, really?
That was a lot of fun. And your thoughts on Sting's project with Shaggy? Listening to your latest album, as well as the other guys' solo works over the years, it's amazing that 3 guys like you, with your avant-garde approach to music, actually found each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's totally unique.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of what we did, because here's a reality check. I just came back from South America. I have a band down there called Call the Police.
Call the Police,
Call
okay.
the Police. Now, that sounds really weird. I've hooked up with a very famous drummer called João Baroni. He's the drummer of the Paralamas. They're totally legendary. They've had hundreds of number ones. And the singer-bass player is a guy called Rodrigo Santos. He's out of Red Baron, very famous.
Yeah.
So we got sort of a super group, but it sort of just came about organically because I play in Brazil every year, at least once every year.
Lucky you.
Yeah, no, I'm like what's the word? Karaoke, basically. Half my life is in Brazil. And I have sort of a manager there. And I met Rodrigo's like these two guys, I should preface, were extremely influenced by the police, as so many people were.
Yes.
Anyway, I did a couple of things with Rodrigo, and it was very pleasant. Great guys, and all having a great time, and very talented, great bass player, singer. And then Luis Paulo, the manager, thought, we should get Baroni in because that's just going to power it up. And it did, and we've done 2 tours now. So the tour I just did. But, we had raging audiences every night. We're pulling about 3,000 a night.
Oh, man.
With this setup. The band is absolutely killer.
Right.
They're very good players.
You got to come back to New York. I want to see.
Man, I'm saying, man, we should really get this out into the world if we could handle it right.
Yeah.
Because we just did Argentina, Chile, and Brazil, but it's so successful. But it does occur to me, when all this rock, all the standard stuff. The police music is absolutely unique. There's nothing else really like it anywhere. I know, just from the guitar parts
that's
alone.
what I was getting to, because your style of guitar, Sting's bass, and his thoughts, and Stewart's insane drumming. Again, amazing that you guys actually met each other and formed a band. And your approach to pop music, and at the end of the day, it is pop music because you had so many hits.
It is.
But nothing sounded like it.
Nothing sounded like it.
Or today.
No, it's never been imitated. And yet the strong... I go on stage every night in Brazil, raging, up at stage, calling out the name, it didn't matter. Those songs... I go, man, this is 40 years later. These songs are still absolutely killing it. And we're talking. I'm not playing to old people.
Right.
We're kids.
Yeah.
So, I do feel sort of legacy pride.
Right.
Finally, whereas I think in the past I would have been very much in denial of it. Because I played jazz, avant-garde, experimental music.
Yeah.
I've done for years, but I don't see any shame in going back and playing your old hits.
Right.
Because they're so... fresh and so hip compared to most pop music.
Well, and then you're probably feeding off the vibe of the other two guys in the band as their excitement of playing with you.
Yeah,
the guy who wrote those songs.
Yeah, they're very reverential. It's very nice from the star. The guy's doing the vocals and he does them great, but it's all about the guitar.
Right. Yeah.
And in this situation, we have a less egotistical situation, so I get to play a lot longer solos.
Right, yeah, exactly.
It's much more open.
What I was going to mention, one thing, the good thing about photography is you don't have to run your ideas by anyone else.
Well, that's true. And I think it was one of the things in that, obviously the days of the police, which was such a, I don't know, I was going to say dictatorship. It was such a 3-way decision about everything. The
strong personality, strong musicians.
Yeah, very strong, egotistical, The camera for me was definitely autonomy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to tell you that I worked at IRS Records back in the 90s.
Did you?
With Miles. And of course we heard about, and this is my last question, we heard about the famous van that the police picked up from JFK before your first show at CBGB's, and I believe Squeeze used that van, and then you guys got in the van and then drove to CBGB's. Do I have that story right?
Yeah, well, that was our first appearance in the States. And I think the way it worked out, Stuart's father was here. Stuart was here 1 or 2 days ahead of me and Sting. Sting and I came over, and I think we landed at 11 o'clock at night at Kennedy and went straight to the CBGB's. And we were on stage by midnight with borrowed amps and stuff, but we were so excited to be in America.
Right. And the first gig, CBGB.
Yeah, like the mecca of punk. And, we killed it. We did 2 shows. I think we did the second one at about 2:30 in the morning. It's a complete dive.
Well, you played 2 shows?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And, even then, there was no one like us, really. And, we went down the storm, and we were so... over the moon about the whole thing. And then we did our little tour of the East Coast, up and down, and, sold out we didn't sell out everywhere because we played Poughkeepsie in the snow to 4 people. Yeah, that's a famous. Of course, millions of people playing.
Was that place
there.
called The Chance? I think.
Last Chance Saloon, I think it was.
Oh, Last Chance Saloon.
Yeah.
Yeah, classic. Andy Summers, thank you so much for spending
Great
some time
talking
with
to you.
us.
Thank you.
And for all the fans and everyone here in New York, thank you for all the great music.
Great.
With
Thank
the
you.
police, after the police, into the future.
Yeah.
Please come back. We love you, man.
Thank you, man.
This is Out of the Box with your host, Jonathan Clark. Out of the Box, Sunday nights at 9 on Q1043.